Is light knowledge and sharing that an act of compassion or an act of rebellion? That's definitely something that is a shared thread that, ancient alien theory says we're actually part alien from the Anunnaki or something like that. So we got like Anunnaki DNA in us, but they weren't supposed to do that. And so they were supposed to leave us all Sasquatch. And because they turned ancient Sasquatch into human beings, that was like a super no-no. And I guess they got punished somehow. So Anunnaki combining Sasquatch DNA with theirs equals don't be sharing that shit with those stupid monkey people. They're not smart enough for it. You've done a bad thing. Ancient Alien says it's real, so it's got to be real, right? Hey, folks, welcome back to Heathen Bible Study. I'm Clay, and I am a, Wiccan, mystic, crazy dude who believes in ancient aliens. So maybe I'm not the best guy to be doing this, but let's study the Bible together and figure out how we can connect those tendrils of thought and ideas into all kinds of spiritual and religious practices across the ages. That sounds interesting to you? Today we are exploring Satan, right? The devil, one of the most misunderstood or well understood characters in the Christian Bible. So let's just get right to it, folks. So, in the Christian tradition, Lucifer does mean light bringer or morning star. And these are just, facts, right? It comes from Greek, right? Lux, Lux, and fere, right? Or Ferre, right? Which means light and bearer. So you combine those and you get Lucifere, Lucifer, and boom. Now that's according to Greek, right? Latin. Um, so I'm not going to say I know. I'm doing my research as I go along, doing a little bit of priest stuff, checking things out in the Bible and that kind of stuff. There's this verse, I guess, from Isaiah 4:12. Let me check. Isaiah 14:12, excuse me. And it says, "How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning." So we're going to study Prometheus, of course, who stole fire from the gods and brought it down to human beings and gave them technology. And that was not allowed. That was not good. We're going to explore Sophia, who is a Greek Gnostic traditional goddess, right? An Aeon, Aeon, right? Ion. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. And she got in trouble because she started creating without her other half. I'm not sure if it's a male partner or what. We'll dig into that, folks, together. But she got cast down into the physical world to hang out with us, and yet she still did her best to bring knowledge and light and truth and to help those who were lost find their way back up into heaven. We're going to talk about Lakshmi in the Hindu religion, where she came out of a sea of milk, I guess, and had knowledge and fire and all of these other things. And the gods got jealous, kicked her out of heaven, and she was like, came up there and burned that son bitch down and said, nah. So exploring those myths about fire and knowledge creating destruction, but also balance and some tension there with some old gods and whatnot. And of course, we're going to dig into Buddhism a little bit because they're not so much about the God out there. They're about the questions within and how we can turn that idea inward and not think about temptation as an outside force, but acknowledge my personal opinion on these things, that temptation is much more of an inside force, and that while we talk about them from an outside perspective, it is actually a representation of the darkness and temptation that we all have within ourselves. And I'm getting a little bit into my own woo factor thing that I believe, but let's explore all of this. And so, firstly, we are going to have to come to a shared premise to keep this conversation going, that light is synonymous with knowledge. And hopefully, we can all kind of agree that that is just the thing. And we're going to go forward from there. That when people say seeing the light, they are actually doing their best to obtain all knowledge in its purest form and bring that to other people. And whether that's technology, whether that's spiritual enlightenment, we're not going to get too lost in the sauce on that specifics, but that we're all going to come from this at the premise of light is knowledge. And from that light is knowledge signpost, right? Hopefully, we can understand these stories that the light bringers are very often punished, but it doesn't stop them from whatever mission it is that they see as important. Or we can think about it, instead of a them story parable kind of thing, let's turn it back on ourselves. True enlightenment has a real cost out there in your relationships, and it's totally worth it. Which really brings us to this kind of core point here: is the Lightbringer myths, all of them, are they about rebellion or compassion for humanity? So that's going to be the lens that we're looking at this through. Is, are they rebellious, a bunch of, against God, or are they genuinely trying to bring something to make a more whole humanity so that we can be more like God? Because without knowledge, without light, can we truly create and be living in God's image? Or are we the sheep, right? Are we just, a plant that gets to move around and live off of pure instinct? Or does knowledge give us that self-awareness, that awareness of reality that allows us to truly interact and play and create from a place of freedom and curiosity, where we can acknowledge and understand our place in the universe and use that as a jumping off point to make amazing stuff happen and manifest amazing lives for ourselves and each other and the future. So, just to let you know, we're not actually going to go into like the temptation of Eve, because I think we all know that story well enough. So, I'm going to dig into the more interesting stuff, Tumwa, which is the fall of Satan, Lucifer. And I think that looks like it's in Isaiah 14:12 through 15. And then some of it is in like Ezekiel. So let's jump in there and see what it says. So this is interesting. It is to the Prince of Tyre, Tyre. And so this actually doesn't directly reference Lucifer, the devil, Satan at all. This passage in Ezekiel 28, a message for Tyr's king, is, the king of Tyre, not the prince. So that's interesting that this is associated with the fall of Lucifer or whatever, the fallen angel. Comment below and like correct me if I'm on the right track here, or if how this cohesion came to be, right? How these became cross-referenced. I'd be really curious to understand more about this, because I'm just using ChatGPT and some other Google searches and whatnot to understand these things and then dig right into the text. But I don't have a reference point to really check myself and know that I'm doing the right thing and not being led down a different garden path that I want to be going down. So please let me know if I'm on the right track. I'm going to assume I am, maybe mistakenly, and let's just go ahead and move forward here with Ezekiel 28, a message for Tyr's king. Then this message came to me from the Lord, Son of man, give the prince of Tyr this message from the sovereign Lord. In your great pride you claim, I am God. I sit on a divine throne in the heart of the sea. But you are only a man and not a god, though you boast that you are a god. You regard yourself as wiser than Daniel and think no secret is hidden from you. With your wisdom and understanding, you have amassed a great wealth, gold and silver for your treasuries. Yes, your wisdom has made you very rich, and your riches have made you very proud. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Because you think you are as wise as a god, I will now bring against you a foreign army, the terror of the nations. They will draw their swords against your marvelous wisdom and defile your splendor. They will bring you down to the pit, and you will die in the heart of the sea, pierced with many wounds. Will you then boast, I am a god, to those who kill you? To them you will be no god, but merely a man. You will die like an outcast at the hands of foreigners. I, the sovereign Lord, have spoken. Then this further message came to me from the Lord, Son of man. Sing this funeral song for the king of Tyre. Give him this message from the sovereign Lord. You were the model of perfection, full of wisdom and exquisite in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Your clothing was adorned with every precious stone, red carnelian, pale green peridot, white moonstone, blue-green beryl, onyx, green jasper, blue lapis lazuli, turquoise, and emerald, all beautifully crafted for you and set in the finest gold. They were given to you on the day you were created. I ordained and anointed you as the mighty angelic guardian. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Maybe a little bit of reference there. I could see how this gets twisted or combined. Okay. You had access to the holy mountain of God and walked among the stones of fire. You were blameless in all you did from the day you were created until the day evil was found in you. Your rich commerce led you to violence, and you sinned. So I banished you in disgrace from the mountain of God. I expelled you, O mighty guardian, from your place among the stones of fire. Your heart was filled with pride because of all your beauty. Your wisdom was corrupted by your love of splendor. So I threw you to the ground and exposed you to the curious gaze of kings. You defiled your sanctuaries with your many sins and your dishonest trade. So I brought fire out from within you, and it consumed you. I reduced you to ashes on the ground in the sight of all who were watching. All who knew you were appalled at your fate. You have come to a terrible end, and you will exist no more. Okay, that's something to think about, because it is written to the king of Tyre, but this actually kind of speaks already a lot to what I wanted. Maybe I'm being personal biased here to talk about in how this is about us and our hubris and are we getting too big for our britches, and are we being dangerous with our knowledge and conceited with our knowledge? Because knowledge is a good thing until you think you're right about everything because you think you know too much. And I think that's really what this passage specifically is all about, is staying humble. It's not saying the pursuit of knowledge is bad. It's not saying any of that stuff, that the pursuit of riches and gold and adornment with all of these things is bad in any way. It's what those riches and splendor and beauty allow you to think about yourself, how you allow yourself to be in your own mind and not to raise yourself up above God, above creation, and to acknowledge that there are higher powers than you. And if you can't do that, if you start getting all, I created this, I did this, this is by my own grace, that's where you're going to get into trouble. So that's really interesting to me, that if we don't see these so literally, if we're able to kind of back away and see these as stories that apply to all of us in our own lives, and what lessons can we learn from passages like this? So this is what I'm hoping to have conversations about, is these kinds of things. Is it respectful to abstractify this stuff a little bit, not necessarily worry about this being a factual funeral, rite of a king that existed in history, and think of it as a lesson that we should all be applying to ourselves about hubris and getting too big for our britches and allowing our own riches and our own lives to allow us to get egotistical about thinking that we created all of this, when from a Christian perspective, you were allowed to create it by the grace of God. From a mirror principle perspective, you manifested it because you reflected that, because that was an inner reflection of who you were. And that reflection brings in those kinds of things because you are grateful in your heart. You see the abundance in the world, and so abundance comes to you because that is where you exist. And not to, even in the mirror principle, you're not supposed to be all like, I created this. It's out there in the universe for you. It was already created. All you're doing is aligning yourself in frequency, in resonance, in getting up to that higher level of love so that you can exist in your highest possible timeline. Isaiah 14:12. So you'll notice for these ones, I'm not actually going to jump into the other versions of the Bible. This one's actually really easy to read. And I think that with these specific passages, we're not losing a lot of the meaning there. And having like a direct word for word or an older translation isn't really going to change our interpretation of what we're reading here. But comment below. Let me know what you think. We can keep doing the 3 Bible thing, but for now, I'm just going to kind of skip over that, and we're going to go read through Isaiah 14. I'm not going to start at 14:12. I'm going to start at 14:1. So it is 12 through 15, though, so we've got a little bit to get through. But I do think this is interesting that in Isaiah here, we are again a taunt for Babylon's king. We're talking to a Babylonian king. Excuse me. ChatGPT says, originally about the king of Babylon, but Christian tradition reads it symbolically as describing Satan's fall from heaven. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just doing my best. 14:1, Isaiah, a taunt for Babylon's king. But the Lord will have mercy on the descendants of Jacob. He will choose Israel as his special people once again. He will bring them back to settle once again in their own land. And people from many different nations will come and join them there and unite with the people of Israel. The nations of the world will help the people of Israel to return. and those who come to live in the Lord's land will serve them. Those who captured Israel with themselves will themselves be captured, and Israel will rule over its enemies. That's a little old school. That's a little, yeah. This is why we're doing this, folks. In that wonderful day when the Lord gives his people rest from sorrow and fear, from slavery and chains, you will taunt the king of Babylon. You will say, the mighty man has been destroyed. Yes, your insolence is ended. For the Lord has crushed your wicked power and broken your evil rule. You struck the people with endless blows of rage and held the nations in your angry grip with unrelenting tyranny. But finally, the earth is at rest and quiet. Now it can sing again. Even the trees of the forest, the cypress trees and the cedars of Lebanon sing out this joyous song. Since you have been cut down, no one will come now to cut us down. In the place of the dead, there is excitement over your arrival. The spirits of world leaders and mighty kings long dead stand up to see you. With one voice they will cry out, now you are as weak as we are. Your might and power were buried with you. The sound of the harp in your palace has ceased. Now maggots are your sheet and worms are your blanket. Okay, feels a little aggressive to me, but I'm an outsider. How you are fallen from heaven, O shining star, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to the earth, you who destroyed the nations of the world. For you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I will preside on the mountain of the gods far away in the north. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High. Instead, you will be brought down to the place of the dead, down to its lowest depths. Everyone will stare at you and ask, can this be the one who shook the earth and made the kingdoms of the world tremble? Is this the one who destroyed the world and made it into a wasteland? Is this the king who demolished the world's greatest cities and had no mercy on his prisoners? The kings of the nations lie in stately glory, each in its own tomb. But you will be thrown out of your grave like a worthless branch, like a corpse trampled underfoot. You will be dumped into a mass grave with those killed in battle. You will descend to the pit. You will not be given a proper burial, for you will have destroyed your nation and slaughtered your people. The descendants of such an evil person will never again receive honor. Kill this man's children. Again, it feels aggressive to me, but comment below if I'm misinterpreting or whatever, because I'm just reading what I see. Let them die because of their father's sins. They may not rise and conquer the earth, filling the world with their cities. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies say. I myself have risen against Babylon. I will destroy its children and its children's children, says the Lord. I will make Babylon a desolate place of owls, filled with swamps and marshes. I will sweep the land with the broom of destruction. I, the Lord of heaven's armies, have spoken. So, again, this is about a person. Kind of. Or is this about all of us, right? That's where we kind of have to think, have some leeway here, right? Is this about a specific king and does it just apply to them? Is it a factual story, a factual piece of history that we can read and see like a documentary? Or is this a lesson about no matter how high we rise, if we are cruel, if we subjugate, if we destroy cities and enslave people, is anybody going to remember us nice? Is anybody going to be nice to our children? Are we just creating ruin and rot? And are we going to be supported by the universe, by God? Or are we gonna be our own worst enemy and eventually, is karma, which doesn't actually work that way, but whatever, we'll get into that later. But karma's a bitch. And is that just gonna come around? And is that witch's tenfold thing, threefold, depending on who you are? Is that just gonna come around to bite you? And do you reap what you sow? So I'd like to start these conversations and have this kind of, blah, 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 blah. We could get into the nitty gritty about, what does it say here? Those who captured Israel will themselves be captured, and Israel will rule over its enemies. I mean, like I said, we can get into the nitty gritty details. I don't think that's incredibly productive, though, for these kinds of talks that I'm trying to have. But let me know what you guys want to talk about, how you guys want to guide this conversation, as long as you're truly coming from a place of open and honest questioning, as long as you're coming from a positive place of, maybe this is just an old school way of thinking. Maybe most Christians aren't trying to be as hard-lined about this and wanting to rule over their enemies and that kind of stuff. Maybe there is a more of a turn your other cheek sort of Jesus-y way, New Testament kind of thing to think about this, right? Because I'm new to this. This is the first time you're ever seeing me read this stuff in my entire life. So I am not entirely sure what the normal or standard interpretations are of verses like this, right? So I don't have a lot of context by which to have an opinion on this kind of stuff. All I can do is just take a first once over, and it seems old to me in its ideals. It seems to come from a place of, we're in charge now, neener neener, but an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So I do have not enough context by which to understand what it is that they're saying and what it means to rule over your enemies. Maybe that's not as aggressive as it comes off to me, in my initial thoughts, right? Maybe it just means they'll be the ones in power. And maybe that's not a bad thing if the people in power are about the light of God and creation and seeing everybody. I'm not sure how to interpret that. So let's just take that as it is. I don't have a lot of hardline views on this yet. I'm really mostly just curious and want to keep the conversation around, can we apply the words in this, the lesson I think we can find in this passage, to ourselves, right? The lesson about hubris, the lesson about treating others the way we want to be treated, and what happens when you don't do those things. And are you succumbing to the devil we all have inside of us, the darkness we all have inside of us? And what are the repercussions of that? Is this passage speaking to the repercussions of that? And the opposite side of that, when we get more to the Jesus stuff, what are the repercussions and consequences of living in the light and treating others as we want to be treated, turning the other cheek, right? Looking after the lamb. Are those two different sides of the same coin for what happens if you fall into darkness and what happens if you live in the light? So I am going to have to read it from my iPad here, because I don't have this stuff memorized and it's all new to me. But first, we're going to go into Hinduism and the Lakshmi myth. I've just kind of cliff notes this stuff out. So I'll read to you what ChatGPT has said here. So Lakshmi, Hinduism, summary. Lakshmi, goddess of fortune and light, emerged during the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the cosmic ocean by gods and demons seeking immortality. She radiated beauty and abundance, blessing the gods with prosperity, fertility, and enlightenment. In some regional myths, When the gods grew arrogant and stopped honoring her, Lakshmi withdrew her blessings, causing the heavens to fall into chaos. When blocked from re-entering the divine realms by those same gods, she is said to have burned the gates of heaven with her radiant light, forcing the gods to recognize her necessity. So, the themes being there, light equals prosperity, abundance, all that kind of stuff. Some kind of, maybe it represents knowledge, maybe it just represents creation and that kind of stuff. But then there is a theme there that without light, things fall into chaos, which is a little bit different than over on the Bible side, where it sounds like without light and knowledge in that teaching, things are smooth sailing and whatever, and it's actually light or knowledge, or maybe the misuse of knowledge, that leads to chaos. So again, these are just discussion points for things to talk about, differences in how other religions and spiritual practices have a bend or slant to their own ideas of what knowledge brings to humanity, what the pitfalls are. You can kind of think about this like, if we're just to draw a parallel here, where divine light, Lakshmi's light, you can't control that, right? Like she's like, you, I do what I want. If you're not gonna help worship me and think I'm the best, I'm light itself. Forget you. And you can't go around disrespecting knowledge, right? Light is going to shine everywhere. That's just what it does. I think that's why we use that as the metaphors. It gets in the cracks, it goes through everything. It's just, that's what we do. And so that kind of like points to this like inevitability of the role that Satan, the snake, plays in humanity's creation, almost, right? In the development of human beings as what we are today. We were always going to have knowledge, right? We're always going to do that. That's why, having fire brought down to us is always what happens. Discovery, the search for more, we've always done that. That's a core part of some fundamental thing. That's why I think it's more productive to read the stories of the Bible kind of from one step away and more of an abstract idea, right? In really useful teachings that we can all apply to ourselves instead of a documentary style version of history. Because that's just temptation. The snake is just temptation. And we all fall to temptation every so often. That's just what you got to do, man. Oreos taste great. And so, because temptation is a thing we all deal with, we all have to deal with that voice in our head that says, no, search for more, go find out more, break rules, genetically modify sheep, and let's see what happens. Bring back the dire wolf. It's gonna work out great. Things like that, right? It's the could versus should argument. And we do a lot of stuff because we can, and not that I'm saying like bringing back the direwolves is actually going to end in some Jurassic Park style tragedy for all humanity. I'm just saying we do stuff because it's interesting. We let that snake on our shoulder tell us what to do all the time because discovery is so amazing. But is that the devil on your shoulder? And are we doing things because we should do them? Are we focusing resources in a positive and productive way to make 0 point energy available to all human beings so that energy costs go down to zero? Or are we, living a Jurassic Park horror story because we can, and super viruses, made it the Wuhan. I'm sorry. Never mind. Forget that. Yeah, right. Of course, the next one is going to be Prometheus because He's super, super famous. I mean, they made an Alien movie about him, so he's got to be famous, right? Anyway, Prometheus, a titan, foresaw the eventual fall of the Olympian gods and took pity on humanity who were suffering in ignorance. Against Zeus's orders, Prometheus stole fire from the gods, hiding it in a fennel stalk, and gave it to mankind. Fire represented not just warmth, but technology, knowledge, and civilization. For this defiance, Zeus chained Prometheus to a mountain where an eagle would devour his liver each day, a brutal punishment for bringing humanity the spark of progress. So, same vein, tie stuff together. Prometheus is punished for pulling humanity out of ignorance. And if the fruit from the tree of knowledge is Lucifer, Satan, the devil doing the same thing, that's an interesting parallel to these stories where whoever that God is that shares knowledge, that gets rid of ignorance for humanity, they are punished somehow. And that's definitely something that is a shared thread that, ancient alien theory says we're actually part alien from the Anunnaki or something like that. So we got like Anunnaki DNA in us, but they weren't supposed to do that. And so they were supposed to leave us all Sasquatch. And because they turned ancient Sasquatch into human beings, that was like a super no-no. And I guess they got punished somehow. So Anunnaki combining Sasquatch DNA with theirs equals don't be sharing that shit with those stupid monkey people. They're not smart enough for it. You've done a bad thing. Ancient Alien says it's real, so it's got to be real, right? So I'd never heard of this Gnostic Christianity before and the Sophia character. So we're just going to blaze through that really, really quick. Sophia is a divine emanation, an aeon, of the true God in Gnostic mythology. In her desire to create without her male counterpart, she falls into the lower worlds, giving birth unknowingly to a flawed being, sometimes called the demiurge or the demiurge, who mistakenly believes he is the ultimate God. Sophia becomes trapped in the material world, but continually sends out light and wisdom to help trapped souls remember their divine origin. Ultimately, her fall leads to the awakening of humanity. And so this kind of speaks almost to like those first two passages from the Bible that we read about hubris, getting too big for your britches, creating dire wolves just because we can, because we get all lost in the sauce about, ooh, I love creation. Ooh, I love doing shit. And then all of a sudden we look back and, oh, no, did we do something wrong here? But that always, that's that stub your toe thing. That's these painful consequences that always end up in human beings getting what we needed to make us what we are today. Um, and so we need to be grateful for these stories and understand that, what's the Spider-Man quote? With great power comes great responsibility. And I think that's kind of what we're saying here, which is why, Marvel Comics and all that stuff are so cool, is they actually do teach us some of these really core lessons about what it means to have an obligation to the society you live in, and how to live with thinking about others in mind and not just living selfishly, right? And I think that that's sort of what all of this sort of Bible verse stuff and then all of these spiritual teachings are hinting around is even the gods are willing to face the punishment, the consequences, by thinking about others and sharing knowledge and bringing humanity up to that level of godlike behavior where we do manifest as ultimate creators. But the other side of that is that we can create destruction. We can be destroyers with pieces of creation. We don't always have to create love. We can create hate and fear and all of these other things because we have knowledge now, because we understand how the game is played, as it were, or all more of the rules of this game of reality. And the more you understand, the more dangerous you're going to be, right? When we get into space travel and start poking wormholes together and stuff like that, who knows what kind of stuff we could be getting into, and Hellraiser style alternate dimensions, or here comes Doom and the planet Phobos, the moon Phobos, right? And oh my gosh, and they might not be hell dimensions, but it could suck really bad. And we don't even know what kind of Pandora's box we're opening, but we're certainly going to open them all. And that's the kind of stuff that I believe is being spoken about with those kinds of Bible passage and taught about in these other spiritual and religious practices. To keep things on the woo side, we are going to get into Buddhism and Buddhism really quick, and the story of the Buddha, just to kind of break away into the even more abstract. Siddhartha Gautama, later known as the Buddha, left behind his royal life to seek truth behind suffering. After years of meditation under the Bodhi tree, he awoke to the true nature of reality, recognizing that suffering comes from attachment and illusion, like attachment to your jewels and your money, right? More money, more problems. And the illusion that maybe you are God and that you can build your throne above God's stars, those kinds of things, getting lost in your own sauce. This awakening or enlightenment is often symbolized as being filled with light, dispelling the darkness of ignorance. So there is no external devil here, and that's why I wanted to bring this point up, right? And wanted to talk about this idea that it is an own internal darkness where we are living in our own illusions, right? Kind of hearkening back to the whole God is love thing. Are the logs and the specks in our eyes an analogy for the same illusions that we can be living under? Right? Where if we're creating a false lens, an illusion that we believe in, that we believe that that's reality, is that where real pain and suffering comes from? Thinking we know what's really going on, thinking we know what's best for others, but really not even being able to see the whole picture, living in our own illusions, living in our own preconceptions, our own generational trauma, if you want to take it there, right? Those kinds of things where all of these to me are hinting at and showing these same basic ideals of light is knowledge. Light and enlightenment are seeing past your own illusions that most of us live our everyday lives hiding behind because it's safe there, it's comfortable there. And even though it's safe and comfortable, it's actually not us expanding into and growing into our most authentic selves, that staying in a box where we're just not growing as much as we can. We should always be a little bit uncomfortable. We should always be willing to question our actions, our motives, our ideals, and make sure that we're growing and adapting. And as the world changes around us, we're not afraid of change, but we embrace change as the only true constant, and allow ourselves to change as things go on, right? As the world changes, don't follow the pack. That's not what I'm saying here. But I am saying, oh, this is going to sound mean. I am saying don't be a flat earther, right? As you see cultures emerge, as you see things change, as you see, um, don't get stuck in the past, right? We can get back corporal punishment, get past corporal punishment for raising children, right? You don't need to smack your kids around anymore. We can evolve past that as a species, right? We can evolve past thinking that the earth is flat. Those kinds of things are what I mean, right? Where we can think past AI being a horrible Terminator, Skynet style horror situation and realize that it could absolutely be this super awesome Star Wars style, Star Trek style thing where we're going to be able to go into the holodeck one day and spin up any world we want, any illusion we want, and go and practice our skills in there. Maybe just meditate for a bit, blah, 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 right? That embracing change and the way the world changes is the positive way to move forward as a society. And finding out, having positive discussions about what new knowledge and what new changes are really going to benefit us, what those benefits are, how they're going to be doled out among the masses as well, right? Like 0 point energy would have been pretty rad. Tesla was on the right track. And those kinds of things. Can we be doing more to change in better ways and create a really awesome future that we're all looking forward to, and we're all just changing our priorities in a unified way to make the best culture possible that we want to pass down to the next generations, right? Is that possible? And so that's what I mean by embracing change, right? There's a whole bunch of nuance there about how a lot of more conservative folks are really not comfortable with the amount of change and what's changing currently in American culture these days. And let's talk about it. Let's be open about it. Let's be kind about it. But a lot of that stuff to me is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and it's really getting focused on the minutia of things. And that there, in my opinion, are bigger and more amazing things that we can be talking about and focusing on as a culture. That they're bigger levers to pull, and they can get us to better, awesomer places faster than us doing infighting about these little tiny things. Okay, sorry about being on my soapbox for so long, but really, that's kind of roundabout what this video is about talking about how is light knowledge and sharing that an act of compassion or an act of rebellion? Or is it both rebellious compassion of sharing knowledge with maybe a society that's not quite ready yet and just sending it anyway and seeing what happens and risking it for the biscuit and believing in humanity that, hey, we're going to come out of this okay. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to figure it out. Yeah, we're going to bump our shins in the dark a lot along the way. And yeah, it's going to be painful. Growing is painful. Knowing things, we all know ignorance is bliss. Knowledge is hard to deal with. I know we've all had lots of times when we did not want to know the truth. But I know if you did the self work, I know if you took that truth and you didn't shoot the messenger and really internalized those truths, that you got better for it. right? We know this is true. I know it's true for you. I know it's true for me. And I know that it can be true for all of us moving forward, where even if it's a hard pill to swallow, a lot of times it's a pill that's got to be swallowed. And so let's have a conversation about this. Hit me up in the comments below, and let's create really positive dialogues about interesting topics like, what can we learn from these passages in the Bible about the devil? And can we share across thoughts, across cultures, across ideologies, in order to come up with an understanding that everybody can agree on for what are these core lessons? How do we use these core lessons to treat ourselves, to treat the planet, to treat each other better? How do we learn these tales of caution and internalize them to create a better reality for everybody? That's what this hopefully is the takeaway from it. That's what I would like to be as the takeaway from this video, is building bridges, seeing people on the other side as the same, as having the same stories, the same history, the same lessons, and what can we do and what conversations can we have to move forward into the future together. And so, since we did the devil one, let's do the next video on Jesus. And something I think we can all agree is living in the light, right? And what are those core teachings that we can take away from? What are the other religious and spiritual practices we can tie this unified belief system into, or hopefully create kind of a, not necessarily unified belief system, but a unified understanding of the core values that run through humanity, right? Is that something that we can build off of, starting with the teachings of Christ as like this foundational core node, I suppose? If that sounds interesting to you, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can get notified when I do the Jesus video, so that we can really keep this going, keep a cohesive, coherent set of conversations building, so that we can all come together and start to find some things to agree on instead of things to fight about. That's it, folks. Thank you so much for sticking around for this episode of Heathen Bible Study, and hopefully I will see you guys out there in the real world. Thank you.